This happened last summer. I was 32 years old and had just moved into a new apartment in an old building. I thought it was going to be a fresh start. I was a freelance graphic designer and worked from home. The loft had a cool charm with its exposed brick and wooden beams. I liked it, but I wasn't ready for what came next. On my third night, I was settling in with a movie. I wanted to distract myself from all the unpacked boxes. That's when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the wall. At first, I thought it was the old pipes. I turned up the volume, but the sound kept creeping back in. It felt strange, like something wanted my attention. My heart raced a little as I tried to ignore it. As the nights rolled by, the rhythmic tapping turned into something more disturbing. One night, I woke up to scratching noises. It was deliberate, like something was trying to get out of the wall. I sat up in bed and listened closely. Panic began to swell in my chest. I hoped I was just imagining it. Maybe it was just the plumbing, I told myself. But then the whispers started. They were soft at first, just faint murmurs drifting through the air. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel they were human. My stomach twisted, and I felt anxious. I wanted to know where the sounds came from, but fear held me back. I grabbed a flashlight a few times and searched the apartment, peeking out the windows, but no one was ever there. Shadows flickered past the glass, but every time I looked, nothing was there. I felt like I was losing my mind. I struggled to sleep, jumping at every little sound. I could almost see shadows behind me, lurking and waiting for me to turn around. I thought about knocking on my neighbors' doors to ask if they heard it too. But what would I say? "Excuse me, have you noticed the noises?" Then came the night that made everything worse. I heard the tapping turn into clear phrases. Someone said my name. "Jenna." I froze. Did I really hear that? My skin prickled with fear. I wanted to scream. My heart was racing, and I felt cold, as if all the warmth drained from the room. I told myself to just ignore it, but it was hard. Something was definitely wrong. By the time I decided to confront the sounds, my fear felt overwhelming. I took a deep breath and stood by the wall, gathering courage to knock back. I hesitated. My hand trembled in the dim light. Then I heard the voice again, unmistakable. "Jenna." I turned around. Nobody was there. I felt cold all over. It was like the air had thickened, pressing down on me. I wanted to run, but couldn't move. I just stood there, staring into the emptiness, praying whatever it was wouldn't call my name again. The next morning, I barely slept. I rolled around in bed, haunted by the memory of that voice. I knew I needed to do something. Ignoring the sounds wasn't working anymore. I decided to venture out and try to find out more about the building, maybe even ask my neighbors if they'd heard anything weird. As I walked down the hallway, the old wood creaked under my feet. I felt like every step was broadcasted through the empty building. I approached the door across from mine and knocked lightly. After a few moments, an older woman answered. Her face had deep lines, and a furrow sat permanently on her brow. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice gravelly. "Hi, I'm Jenna. I just moved in," I stammered, feeling suddenly shy. "Have you ever heard any strange noises, like tapping or whispers?" She regarded me with suspicion, as if I was asking about ghosts instead of noise. For a second, I thought she might close the door on me. Then she sighed and stepped aside. "Come in," she said reluctantly. I followed her into a dimly lit apartment. It smelled like Old Spice and something sweet. "What do you mean by noises?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "I keep hearing tapping on the walls and whispers at night," I explained. "It's been really unsettling." She paused, looking away deep in thought. "You're not the first to mention it. A long time ago, there was a tenant here. Someone who went missing." My stomach dropped. "They say she built a special room inside these walls. People thought it was an odd obsession. After that, noises started." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean by special room?" She shrugged. "No one knows. but sometimes the walls talk back. Her eyes bore into mine, and I wondered what else she knew. Did they ever find her? I asked softly. She shook her head. No one knows what happened to her, just rumors. I swallowed hard. No one had mentioned anything like that when I signed the lease. The woman's face softened slightly. You'll get used to it, or maybe someday it'll stop. As I left her apartment, unease settled in my chest. I need to know more. I left the floor and headed to the basement. There had to be something down there. Maybe old maintenance records or even remnants of the room she mentioned. When I reached the basement door, I hesitated. The air felt heavy, and I could hear water dripping somewhere within the darkness. The last thing I wanted was to be down there alone. But curiosity pushed me forward. As I stepped inside, the smell of mold hit me. I switched on the flashlight and scanned the room. Stacks of boxes were piled in a corner. I rifled through them, searching for anything that might give clues about the tenant. That's when my flashlight caught something glimmering in a far corner. I moved closer, and my heart started racing again. I bent down to get a better look. It was a small, ornate key. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It felt old and heavy. I could almost hear the whispers again, swirling around in my mind. Why was it here? The voices echoed louder in my head, as if the walls themselves were urging me to find out what the key unlocked. Then, the basement door creaked loudly behind me. I froze and slowly turned around, heart pounding. Someone was standing in the doorway. I took a step back, clutching the key tightly in my palm. The silhouette in the doorway was tall and shadowy, blocking most of the light. My heart raced. "Who's there?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure shifted slightly, and I could make out a faint outline of a man. "Just a neighbor," he replied, his voice low and gravelly, mirroring the woman's from earlier. "What are you doing down here?" I was just looking for some old records," I stammered, feeling like I was hiding something. "I didn't mean to intrude." He took a step closer, and the beam of my flashlight illuminated his face. It was lined and tired, with dark circles under his eyes. There was something eerie about the way he peered at me, as if he knew more than he let on. "You shouldn't be down here alone," he said, his tone dripping with warning. "Why?" I asked, more curious than scared. He shrugged, but I could see a flicker of something behind his eyes. "We all have our secrets. The basement holds a lot of them. Best not to disturb what should stay buried." I didn't know what to think. Was he trying to protect me or scare me away? I hesitated but felt an instinct pulling me to dig deeper. "What do you mean? What happened to the woman?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She wanted to know too much about the building. She thought she could unlock the past. One day, she vanished. Just like that." He snapped his fingers. No one heard anything. My stomach knotted at his words. I glanced down at the key in my hand. Did it belong to her secret room? "If she built something inside these walls, I have to find it," I said, more to myself than him. "Maybe you should leave it alone," he said, shaking his head. "Some keys are better off lost." His expression turned serious, almost pleading. "Forget what you heard. The whispers. It's best to silence them." I backed away, my instincts shouting at me to leave. But as I moved, I noticed he wasn't stepping aside. He stood in front of the door, blocking my exit. "Let me out," I said, trying to sound firm. Fear crept into my voice despite my efforts. "Just think, Jenna. Do you really want to know? Some things are meant to stay hidden," he said, with a grim intensity. In that moment, I had a choice to make. I could blindly trust a stranger's warning, or I could confront the mystery head-on. "I have to find out," I whispered. But as I gathered my courage to push past him, he suddenly raised a hand. "Wait," he said sharply. "It's not safe." Just then, the lights flickered above us. I felt a chill breeze sweep through the basement as if something had awakened. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of whispers rising around us, flowing through the walls. Panic surged within me as I turned back to him. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, the basement door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. The whispers grew louder, swarming us like an unseen storm. I was trapped. The darkness pressed in on me, thick and suffocating. I could barely see the outline of the man's figure in front of me, but I felt his presence loom larger amidst the chaos around us. The whispers felt alive, wrapping around my legs like vines, pulling me towards something I couldn't see. "Stay close," he said urgently. I could hear the tremor in his voice. "Don't panic, just breathe." Panic surged again, instinctively rising from the pit of my stomach. "How can you tell me to breathe?" I snapped back. "Do you hear that?" "Yes, I hear it," he admitted, looking around wildly as if searching for the source. The whispering was no longer just a murmur. It was rising and falling, an otherworldly chorus that set my nerves on edge. It felt like voices from another time, trying to break free from their confines. I took a step back, bumping into the shelves behind me. I fumbled for my flashlight, shining it against the walls. Shadows danced like phantoms, and the light illuminated cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, twisting with the same eerie quality as the whispers. I couldn't shake off the chill crawling over my skin. "What does it want?" I asked, the tremor in my voice betraying me again. The man glanced at me sharply, urgency written across his face. "It wants the truth," he said, almost to himself. "But the truth isn't something you want to uncover." I moved away from the shelves, scanning the dark corners of the basement. "Did you hear about the woman who vanished? What did she find down here?" His expression shifted, hardening like a stone. "You mustn't dwell on her. The curiosity that brought her here. It consumed her. It could do the same to you." I swallowed hard, glancing at the key still clenched in my fist. "But I need to know what happened. What did she discover?" "So many have asked the same questions," he said, his voice barely a murmur above the whispers. "But you won't like the answers." I wish I had never heard them. A sudden clatter erupted from the other side of the basement, breaking our tense exchange. Something fell, and I instinctively darted forward, the light from my flashlight chasing the darkness. As I rounded a corner, something caught my eye. A door, half hidden behind a stack of dusty crates. "That's it," I breathed, excitement mingled with fear. "The woman! She must have found a way in there." "No!" he called after me, panic threading through his voice. "We should go!" But I was already on the move, drawn to the door like a moth to a flame. I yanked on the handle, and it creaked loudly as it cracked open. A rush of wind billowed from inside, stale and cold, carrying more whispers that seemed to beckon me closer. That's when I saw it. A faint glow emanating from within, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. For a moment, everything else faded into silence. Then I took a step inside. The door creaked as I stepped into the dimly lit room beyond. The flickering glow illuminated what appeared to be a small, cluttered study. Dust particles floated through the air, catching the light, and I felt as if I had stepped into a forgotten memory. Papers were strewn across the floor, and a desk lamp flickered weakly, trying to hold back the shadows. I moved further inside, the whispers now distant but still echoing in my mind. My heart raced. I was both terrified and compelled to discover what lay hidden within this space. With every step, the glow intensified, guiding me toward the far wall where something was partially obscured by a heavy tapestry. The man shouted from behind me, "Get out! We shouldn't be here!" His voice was strained, laced with anxiety, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. I approached the tapestry, feeling its rough texture under my fingers. I hesitated, glancing back at him. His face was pale, but there was a strange fire in his eyes. I couldn't tell if he wanted to stop me, or if he was simply afraid of what we might find. Taking a deep breath, I pulled the tapestry aside. What I uncovered left me breathless. There, carved into the wall, was a mural, Vivid and chaotic, it depicted twisted figures lost in an endless dance, their expressions a mixture of agony and ecstasy. I could almost hear their cries, an extension of the whispers that seemed to seep from the stone itself. "Look at it!" I exclaimed, my voice trembling. The artistry was mesmerizing and horrifying. "What does it mean?" "It's a warning," he shouted, his tone sharp, cutting through the haze of my curiosity. "This place has a way of trapping souls, of bending reality. They don't just disappear. They're taken." I felt the room grow colder, the air thickening as if it were alive. I sensed a movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing there. "What do you mean, taken?" My voice was barely a whisper now. He stepped closer, his eyes wide with fear. "If you look deep enough into the truth it offers, it might offer you what you want, but at a cost." A sudden crash erupted from somewhere in the room, and the desk lamp flickered violently before going out completely. Darkness enveloped us, and panic returned full force. My flashlight flickered as I swung it around, desperately trying to find an escape route. In that moment of vulnerability, a low growl reverberated from the darkness. It slithered through the air like a snake, chilling me to the bone. "What is that?" I gasped, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. "I don't know," he said, fear mingling with urgency. "But we need to leave. Now!" Just as I turned to run toward the door, I found it slamming shut with a resounding thud. I pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers crescendoed into a roar, drowning out my thoughts. I felt something cold brush against my leg, and I shot back, my heart racing. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was no longer in the room. The darkness was still there, but now it felt thick, heavy, like I was being smothered by it. I blinked a few times, trying to focus, but the shadows didn't fade. Then a faint glimmer caught my eye. It was a sliver of light, slicing through the darkness, and I felt an unexplainable pull towards it. Tentatively, I moved forward. The cold stone floor was rough beneath my fingertips. I could hear my breath quickening, mingling with the whispers which now sounded almost melodic, luring me further into the abyss. "Where are you?" The man's voice broke through the veil of fear, his panic evident. "Stay close." I raised my flashlight, the beam flickering uncertainly. "I'm here!" I yelled back, every ounce of my courage gathering into those two words. I forced myself to move, inch by inch, toward the light. As I got closer, I noticed the glow was coming from the edges of a door I hadn't seen before. It was aged and warped, with symbols carved into the wood that seemed to shimmer. It felt strangely familiar, like something I had seen in old books or whispered about in stories. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling. What if it's a trap? I thought. The man's warning rang in my ears. I hesitated. What if it's worse on the other side? "Open it! We can't stay here!" he shouted, sounding more desperate by the second. His fear ignited a fire in me, pushing me forward despite the uncertainty. I gripped the handle and twisted it. The door creaked loudly, almost in protest, and something inside me screamed to stop. But I pulled it open, the light spilling out and illuminating our faces. "Is it safe?" he asked, eyes darting around nervously. "Only one way to find out," I replied, steeling myself. Together, we stepped through the threshold. What met us on the other side was unexpected. An enormous room filled with vivid colors, swirling patterns, and bizarre furniture that defied logic. It felt like stepping into a dream or a nightmare. All around us, shadows danced like lost spirits, their movements fluid and enchanting. My heart raced. "What is this place?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling yet filled with awe. "But it feels wrong. We need to find a way to get out of here." Before I could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, its features obscured by the dim light. As it stepped closer, I realized it was a woman draped in flowing robes, her face hidden beneath a hood. "You seek the truth, don't you?" she asked, her voice smooth and melodic, yet laced with a subtle menace. "Truth?" I echoed, fear creeping back in. "What truth?" Her laughter echoed eerily in the hall. "The truth of this place, the truth of yourselves." Suddenly the shadows tightened around us, pushing us toward her. I felt a shiver race down my spine. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice shaky. "To show you the cost of your curiosity," she said, her hood shifting slightly to reveal a glint of her eyes. "Are you ready to pay it?" Panic surged once again. I realized that stepping into the room may have been a grave mistake. That's when I felt a cold hand grip my wrist, pulling me back. I turned to see the man, terror etched on his face. "Run!" he shouted, and I didn't hesitate. But as we bolted toward the exit, I knew we weren't just running from the woman. We were running from whatever truth was waiting for us in the dark beyond. We rushed back through the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The vibrant chaos of the room faded behind us, replaced by cold stone and oppressive darkness. But the woman's laughter echoed in my ears, haunting and unnerving. "Where do we go?" I whispered, panic threading through my voice. Ahead of us, the shadows seemed to pulse, mocking our confusion. "We need to find another way out," he said, scanning the walls. "There has to be something we missed." Determined, I turned my flashlight beam toward the nearby wall, hoping to find another door or any indication of an escape. The shadows loomed closer, eager to engulf us again. That's when I noticed something strange on the wall. A faint outline of a door, almost invisible against the stone. "Over here!" I called, my pulse quickening as I approached it. The hinges looked rusted, as if it hadn't been opened in ages. I pushed on the door, but it wouldn't budge. "Help me!" I shouted. Together, we pressed against it, our shoulders digging into the cold surface. With a final shove, the door creaked open, releasing a gust of stale air that smelled like mold and decay. I hesitated, glancing back at the man. "We can't go back," he said breathlessly. "We have to keep moving." I nodded, fear and determination coursing through me as I stepped inside. The new space was small and dark, lit only by the dull glow of strange fungi clinging to the walls. The air felt thick with moisture. As we creeped further in, I could hear low murmurs around us, like voices whispering warnings. They sent chills down my spine. "What is this place?" I breathed. He shined his flashlight around, revealing what looked like remnants of a long-forgotten room. Old furniture, broken mirrors, and crumbling bookshelves. Everything was covered in layers of dust. "Look!" he pointed, and my eyes fell on something shiny peeking out from underneath a rotting table. I rushed over, heart racing. It was a key, ornate and glowing softly under the light. "Do you think it could help us?" I asked, picking it up. "Maybe," he said, glancing back toward the door we had just come through. The shadows seemed restless, almost alive against the wall. "But we can't linger." I pocketed the key and we turned to leave the room. That's when I heard it again, the woman's voice, closer this time. "You cannot escape the truth." I didn't wait for her to appear. My instincts kicked in, and I sprinted ahead. "Go! Go! Go!" I shouted, urgency pushing me forward. We dashed down a narrow corridor, the cold stone feeling slick beneath our feet. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath us. Then, everything went dark. The light from the flashlight flickered and died, leaving us in complete darkness. I stumbled, my pulse quickening. "What happened?" I whispered, fear gripping me. "Stay close," he said, his voice quivering. But in that darkness, I felt something shift. "I don't think we're alone," I said, unease creeping into my thoughts. Just then, a flickering light appeared in front of us, illuminating a figure clad in shadows. My breath hitched in my throat. "Join me," the voice beckoned through the darkness, full of sinister charm. I felt the weight of the key in my pocket, its warmth a faint glimmer of hope amid the fear. But what would I have to give up to save us? The shadows closed in, and as I turned to the man, I realized this was just the beginning. I blinked, trying to clear the darkness that surrounded us. The flickering light pulsed with an eerie energy, revealing more of the shadowy figure before me. I could see a face now, but it wasn't just any face. It was a blend of familiar features twisted into a mockery of smiles and warnings. "Who are you?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. As if sensing my fear, the figure moved closer, its shape undulating like smoke. "You know me," it said, the voice dripping with familiarity. It was both soothing and unsettling. "I've been waiting for you. For both of you." The man beside me stiffened. "What do you want?" His tone was defensive, but I could hear the tremor in it. "Answers, of course," the figure murmured. "And a choice. After all, you both hold the key." My hand instinctively clenched around the key in my pocket. My thoughts raced. Was this creature connected to the key? And why did it feel like it was wrapped in shadow? "Why should we trust you?" I shot back, trying to channel my fear into anger. The figure chuckled, a sound that echoed hauntingly in the dark. "Trust is not required. Only obedience," it hissed, the light flickering more violently now. "You stand at a crossroads. The truth is near, but it has a price." "What truth?" I demanded, desperation seeping into my voice. I needed to understand. My instincts told me to run, to escape this presence, yet there was a strange pull urging me to stay. "What do you know about us?" The figure tilted its head. "You know more than you think, little girl. You're all caught in web far beyond your comprehension." The shadows around it twisted, and for a moment I could see the outlines of a larger form behind the figure, lurking. I glanced anxiously at the man beside me. "We need to get out of here. Now." My urge to flee intensified, but before we could move, the ground trembled again, this time more violently. I stumbled back, and the figure watched, pleasure evident in its shadowy features. "Fear will only tether you to this place. You must make a choice." That word echoed in the air. Choice. "Choose what?" I asked, my heart hammering in my chest. "Join me in the truth, or walk away with half-formed answers. The key will guide you, but it is your heart that will decide." It reached out a hand, a gesture that seemed both inviting and threatening. I stood frozen, weighing my options. The shadows around us were growing thicker, twisting into faces that screamed for release. With each passing moment, I felt the pull of the unknown growing stronger. Then, through the chaos, I noticed something. A faint glimmer from the glowing key in my pocket, illuminating the darkness with a strange, warm light. It pulsed, almost alive, resonating with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. "What if I don't choose?" I challenged, my voice firm but uncertain. The figure's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth. "Then the shadows will claim you, and you will never find the truth you seek." Panic surged through me, igniting my fight-or-flight response. With one final look at the figure, I pulled the key from my pocket, its glow intensifying. And then everything went white. I had no idea what lay ahead. Only the chilling realization that this was far from over. I gasped as the light faded, throwing me back into shadows. But now, they felt different. Thinner, somehow, less suffocating. I blinked, trying to adjust to the dim surroundings. I was in a hallway, its walls lined with pictures that shimmered faintly like reflections in a dark pool. "What just happened?" I murmured, rubbing my eyes. The key was still warm in my hand, but the figure was gone. I turned to the man beside me, confusion etched on his face. "I don't know," he replied, his voice shaky. "But we need to keep moving." Just then, I heard it. A faint echoing sound, like whispers carried on a chilling breeze. It slithered through the air, tugging at the frayed edges of my mind. I instinctively pressed the key against my chest, feeling another pulse of warmth. "Do you hear that?" I asked, glancing at him. He nodded, eyes wide. "It's coming from down the hall." With each step, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. I strained to make out the words, but they slipped away like mist. Whatever was behind those voices felt close, too close. "Maybe we should backtrack," he suggested, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "No," I said, feeling an impossible pull. "I need to know." I took a deep breath and stepped further into the murky corridor. The key glimmered in my grasp, casting soft light on the floor, illuminating a path ahead. As we approached a doorway at the end of the hall, I could see shadows dancing against the wall. My heart raced. "What if it's a trap?" "Then we'll find our way out," he replied, determination flashing across his features. We reached the door, and I turned the handle cautiously. It swung open with a creak, revealing a wide room filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets. The whispers turned into a chorus, echoing my fears and doubts, filling the air with a chilling promise of revelations unmet. "Something's not right," he whispered anxiously. "This place feels wrong." Ignoring his warning, I stepped inside. The room opened up like a dark mouth waiting to swallow us whole. On the far wall was a large mirror, the surface oddly reflective despite the dimness. I felt drawn to it, curious about what lurked behind my own reflection. I approached slowly, and as I did, the whispers crescendoed into a haunting chant. "Choose wisely," it said, "from the depths of your fears." My pulse quickened, recognizing the tones as they merged into familiar phrases, the warnings that had tugged at my mind since the beginning of this nightmare. "Look," the man said, pointing at the mirror. "What is that?" I squinted at the glass. Through the distortion, a glimpse of a shadowy figure appeared, pulling away from the sides of the frame, reaching towards me. I could feel its intent, a dark reminder of the figure I'd encountered earlier. "That looks like—" Suddenly, the mirror cracked, a jagged line slicing down the middle. My breath caught in my throat as a cold wind swept through the room. The whispers screamed, an urgent call for acknowledgement and fear. I staggered back, heart racing, but it was already too late. The reflections in the shattered mirror stirred, limbs stretching and twisting out of the frame, filling the room with darkness. "Run!" I shouted, panic gripping me now. As we turned to leave, the floor trembled beneath our feet. I had to get out of here, but the shadows shifted, closing in around us. "Someone is in this room with us," he yelled, his voice piercing through the chaos. The echoes of the past and uncertainty rumbled in my ears, pushing me forward. My mind raced. I had to find something, one more answer amid the chaos. I would not become just another whisper in the shadows. The chaos followed me as I sprinted toward the doorway. The man was right behind me, urgency propelling his steps. The remaining shards of the mirror reflected our panicked expressions, twisted and barely human, and it filled me with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. "Where do we go?" I shouted over the growing noise of whispers enveloping us. It felt like they were tightening around our necks, suffocating us with each echoing syllable. "Anywhere but here!" he gasped, glancing over his shoulder, fear etched into his features. We burst through the threshold into the hallway, but the temperature dropped sharply, and a chill ran down my spine. The shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, darting through the corners like demons from my darkest nightmares. I gripped the warm key, its light a small beacon in the overwhelming darkness. As we stumbled forward, I felt drawn to a door I hadn't noticed before. It was partially ajar, revealing a flickering light inside. Despite the instinct to run in the other direction, I took a deep breath and pushed it open, stepping inside. The room beyond glowed with an ethereal light that seemed to emanate from sparks of energy dancing around like fireflies. I almost gasped at the sight, a vast space filled with shelves of books piled to the ceiling, their spines worn and faded with age. There were old maps outlining the building and its history, intricate frameworks of the past woven together like a tapestry. "This must be it," I murmured, walking deeper into the room as curiosity seized me. We might find something here. Jenna, we shouldn't be splitting up, he urged, his voice a mixture of anxiety and warning. I'll be right here, I promised, reluctant to let go of the mystery I was beginning to unravel. As I perused the shelves, I could almost feel the centuries of stories weaving through the air. Yet the whispers circled the room, warning me, taunting me with truths half-formed. Suddenly, I pulled out a dusty book, its cover cracked, revealing fragile pages yellowed with time. It detailed the history of the building, names of tenants long gone, but then it struck me. There was mention of the woman who'd vanished, her descent into madness amplified by obsessive research about the place. Jenna, he called from across the room, tone urgent. You have to see this. I rushed to him, scanning his expression. In his hands was a loose sheet of paper with something scrawled over it. They're accounts, he said, eyes wide as he handed it to me. People who heard the whispers, who followed them. I saw mention of individuals, artists, scholars, even children, all drawn to the madness of the building. And then I saw a name I recognized, the woman from my neighbor's story. She had uncovered something buried, rituals written in incomplete sentences, referencing the power of the walls that held the echoes of the past. What if she wasn't taken but transformed? I whispered. What if she wanted to become part of it? His expression faltered. No one just disappears, Jenna. We need to focus on escaping. The warnings surrounded us, growing louder as a shadow swirled behind him, whispering my name. Jenna! The voice taunted, mixing betrayal and longing. No! We have to fight this, I said, taking a decisive step backward, my heart thrumming relentlessly. Stay together, he urged, regaining his composure. But just then, the room began to shake around us, books tumbling from the shelves like falling debris in a storm. Look for another way out, I shouted, scrambling through the fray of dust and echoes. The shadows seemed drawn to the chaos, feeding off our fear. In the corner, I spotted another door, larger and more ornate than the others. Over there, I pointed, my resolve hardening. We pushed through the debris and reached it, rattling the handle urgently. The whispers grew intense, ringing in our ears, but we forced the door open with one final heave, a wave of energy spilling into the room like a gust of wind. As we crossed the threshold, I felt the pull of the shadows behind us, reaching for the light. We stumbled back into another hallway, brighter but no less unsettling as the whispers resurrected themselves, lingering in the corners of my mind. The key vibrated in my pocket, bewildering me with its warmth. Do you think it's safe here? He asked, glancing back at the door we had just escaped. I don't know, I admitted, breaths coming in shallow bursts. But we can't let it consume us. We need to keep moving. We walked cautiously, each step bringing us deeper into the unknown. The air felt heavy with anticipation, shadows flickering on the edge of our vision, the remnants of a history left untold. What was it you found in the basement? He asked. The old key? I sighed, the memory of the man's warning echoing through my mind. I think it might have brought us here for a reason, to confront the truth. But at what cost? He asked somberly. Maybe there are some truths we're not meant to uncover. In that moment, uncertainty washed over me. What truth had I awakened, and what had we lost in our quest for understanding? We'll figure it out together, I offered, partially for his reassurance and partially for my own. I won't let this place take us both. But would it let us go so easily? As we pressed deeper into the corridor, questions lingered unanswered, the shadows creeping ever closer. Some truths were indeed better left buried, waiting for someone brave enough to let them remain hidden. Stepping into the light at the end, I remembered the laughter in the darkness, both a warning and a promise. Whatever lay ahead was uncertain, but at least I wasn't facing it alone. I moved forward, waiting for the next whisper to reveal itself.